today what we're going to do is we'll be doing an iyun that seems to be an iyun halacha, but it's not. So it's very important for me to tell you, do not use this Gefet to reach halachic conclusions. This is just checking Deot and the Rishonim regarding a very important question. What is Asur for a Nazir to do with his hair? And also, how does that affect the things that are Asur on Shabbos to do with our hair? And this Sugya on Nazir reflects on Masechet Shabbos, and what we're going to do is actually learn things that are connected to Masechet Shabbos, so those of you who learn Moed could actually enjoy your knowledge that you've acquired from before. So let's begin. We're looking at two different dapim here because something interesting happened in the Gemara. There's a Mishnah that if you look in the Mishnah, it's one, but here in the Gemara it was broken up into two places, one in Daf Lamed Chet, the other in Daf Lamed Bet. And the main discussion we're going to have is going to be in Daf Mem Bet, but we're starting in Daf Lamed Chet, so either we'll hear this Gefet on Friday, or Motzei Shabbos, or Monday, Bezrat Hashem, will be relevant in any of these days. Okay, so the Gemara starts with the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is broken into two, but we'll look at the two parts of the Mishnah at one glance. So in Daf Lamed Tet, says the Mishnah, Stam Nazirut למד יום, גילח או שגילחו ליסטין סותר למד יום, נזיר שגילח, בין בזוג, בין בתר, או שספסף כלשהו, חייב. So the Mishnah here talks about the things that a Nazir cannot do with his hair. So a Nazir cannot cut his hair. It doesn't matter how he cuts his hair, בזוג, בתר, או שספסף. What is zog? Zog is scissors because scissors have two parts in them, so that's a zug, so that's zog. Tar, that's cutting your hair with a knife. And sifsef, that's a strange word that we don't know. Let's look at Rashi here, that we know already that Rashi here is not really Rashi. So Rashi here says, sifsef shetalash ktsat berosh hase'ar. So Rashi here says that sifsef is to litlosh, to take out a bit of your hair. It's unclear in Rashi if he's talking about the end of the hair or the top of the hair. If we look at Rabbanit Yael Shimoni on the Mishnah, so he explains that it's really taking out one hair. The Yael says, she'akar v'hishir afilu se'ara achat chayav. And he also gives us the reason. Dichtiv, ta'ar lo ya'aleh, lo ya'avor, לרבות כל המעבירים. It doesn't say in the Torah, tar lo ya'aleh, it says tar lo ya'avor. So the addition of ya'avor means that any kind of taking out of hair, it doesn't matter if you're using a scissor or a knife or even your hand, is asur for a Nazir. Okay, I'm continuing to the continuation of the Mishnah that in our Gemara is in Daf Mem Bet. Nazir chofef umefasfes, aval lo sorek. So here, we have here words that we use in modern Hebrew, chofef v'sorek, and there's a word that we don't really use in modern Hebrew, which is mefasfes. So when we try to understand this Mishnah, we have to notice not to assume that we understand all the words, even though there are more modern Hebrew, maybe their meaning in the Mishnah is different. So what is chofef? What is mefasfes? What is sorek? That's what we're going to try to understand, but at least we know what the dinim are. If you're sifsef, it's asur. If you're sorek, it's asur. If it's chofef or mefasfes, it's mutar. So we want to understand what is sifsef. So we understood chofef, mefasfes, and sorek. Why are chofef and mefasfes mutar and sorek asur? That's our question, and we're moving with that question to the Gemara and Daf Mem Bet. The Gemara says something very interesting. That actually this Mishnah seems to be broken into. Why? Because we have two things that are mutar and one thing which is asur. And the Gemara starts by trying to understand how can that be, because it seems as if all these things are different ways of touching your hair and causing the hair to come down. So why some of them are mutar and one of them are asur? Ask the Gemara, chofef umefasfes mani. Who said that chofef umefasfes mutar? Who said it? Mani. Rabbi Shimoni de'amar davar she'en mitkaven mutar. So the Gemara starts and says, if part of the Mishnah talks about hairs, touching your hair, even though it takes off some of your hair and it's mutar, it has to be Rabbi Shimon. Why? So those of you who learn Masechet Shabbos know that Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan have a big machloket, whether or not you need to have kavana in the thing that you're doing. Rabbi Shimon says דבר שלא מתכוון mutar, and Rabbanan say דבר שלא מתכוון asur. We know this machloket from Masechet Shabbos, and there the description is somebody who's carrying a piece of furniture on the ground and making a hole in the ground. Is that asur or mutar? So Rabbi Shimon says it's mutar, and Chachamim say it's asur. So this machloket is not only in Chol Shabbos, it's also machloket in Kol Torah Kula, because here we're in Nazir, and we have the same machloket here regarding Nazir, and there are no Hilchot Shabbos here in the background. So the Gemara says, if somebody says that if you're doing something and it creates an isur, that it's mutar, it has to be Rabbi Shimon. Why? Because Rabbi Shimon looks at your kavana, and if you don't have a kavana to take out your hair, it's mutar. How do we know that chofef u'mefasfes you don't have a kavana? We have to understand what chofef u'mefasfes is. So the Tosfot explains to us, chofef שיחוף ראשו בנתר ובאדמה, אף כי פעמים שמשאיר שיער דבר שמתכוון הוא מותר, ומפספס שמבדיל שערות זו מזו, אף כי פעמים משאיר. So Tosfot says, chofef is what we say in modern Hebrew, is to wash your hair, and mefasfes is to separate your hairs from one another. And these two things, why are they mutar? Because when I separate my hairs from one another, I'm not trying to take hairs out. I'm just trying to separate them. And if I'm washing my hair, I'm not trying to take hairs out. I'm just trying to make my hair clean. So that's classic Rabbi Shimon. I want to do one thing and I have a result, which I'm not interested in. And it doesn't always happen. So therefore, it's mutar. Continues the Gemara and says, אבל לא סורק. Wait. Rabbi Shimon has to say that all these things are mutar. So how can sorek be asur? Ata leRabbanan. Says the Gemara, it seems as if this Mishnah is broken into two. Because we know that all of these things, Rabbi Shimon says, are mutar. So if in the Mishnah we have two things that are mutar, one thing is asur, so these first two things are the Shita of Rabbi Shimon, and the asur thing has to be Rabbanan. And then the Gemara asks, is that legitimate to take such a small Mishnah and cut it into two, and two things are said by Rabbi Shimon, one thing is said by Rabbanan? That's very hard. Amar Rabba, kula Rabbi Shimon hi kol hasorek le'asir mimin meduldalut mitkaven. So Rabba says, no, you have to find a way how Rabbi Shimon, even though he's usually matir, here he'll be osir. And why? Because kol hasorek le'asir mimin meduldalut mitkaven. What's this? Let's look at the Tosfot. The Tosfot explains, בגמרא משמע, דסתם סורק מתכוון להסיר השיער, להסיר נימים המדולדלות שאינן מחוברות יפה ונוחין להינתק. So Tosfot here explains to us what is sorek. Sorek means I have two kinds of hairs on my head. Some of them are very strongly connected, and some of them are still connected, but they're already weaker. And as a matter of fact, they're going to fall off my head during the day. I might find them in my food. I might find them on my clothes. Lo naim. So what would you do if you know that some of your hairs are weak and some of them are strong? You would treat yourself. How? Just brush your hair and brush your hair in order to make sure that the hairs which are about to fall off in a few hours will fall off already, so you won't have hairs in your plate and in your clothes and whatever. So that's how Tosfot explains this. And he actually says that to be sorek is not what we call in Hebrew listarek. When I say listarek in Hebrew, I don't mean I'm trying to take out hairs that might fall off. When I say listarek in Hebrew, I mean to separate my hairs from one another. Actually, I'm using a different word for mefasfes, which is what was stated before. I just want to have my hair straight when I comb my hair. So combing is not our combing. Combing here is combing in order to take out hairs before it'll fall. It's more like combing a dog, which has a lot of hair and you don't want the hair to be shedding all over the place. So that's what Tosfot explains, and this is how we can understand why Rabbi Shimon is osir. If I am interested in shedding my hair, so that's asur. Why? Because I'm interested in the pula asura. So the first two things, I'm not interested in doing an isur. I'm interested in cleaning my hair. I'm interested in making my hair straight or beautiful, or to separating the hairs from one another. So then, if something happens and a hair is taken off, that's okay, because I'm not mitkaven according to Rabbi Shimon. But if I am mitkaven to take my hairs out so I won't be shedding my hair all over the place, of course, that is asur for a Nazir and also for Hilchos Shabbos. That's Tosfot. But if we look at the Rosh and Rashi in Masechet Shabbos, where this sugya is brought in explanation of what is Asur on Shabbos, we see a different explanation for the sugya. Says the Rosh, "Avalo sorik dehave psik reish kede mifarish bagmar." And Rashi says in Masechet Shabbos, Nun Amud Bet, "Avalo sorek b'masrek devadai meshir." Is there a difference between Tosfot and the Rosh and Rashi? The answer is yes. If you'll notice, Rosh used a halachic term, psik reisha, which was totally absent from the statements of the Tosfot. Tosfot never mentioned psik reisha. And Rashi, even though he didn't say the words psik reisha, he did say that the reason that you're not allowed to be combing your hair is because it is something that will happen for sure, which is a different way of saying psik reisha. So, is there a machloket here between Tosfot and Rashi and Rosh? The answer is yes. This is a machloket, and it's an interesting machloket, and the one who will help us understand this machloket is the Keren Ora, which is a very interesting acharon, who wrote on many masechtot in the Shas, dafka not the classic masechtot, and here he's commentating on Nazir, explaining to us that what's happening here between Tosfot and Rashi is actually pretty interesting. So actually intriguing. Okay, so let's look at what Keren Ora says. Keren Ora starts and says, "Peresh התוספות ז"ל, דחופף ומפספס היינו בין היתר וחול, ואף על גב דקרובין להשאיר שיער, אמרינן בגמרא דרבי שמעון היא דאמר דבר שאין מתכוון מותר, ואחד לא מתכוון להשאיר שיער, אבל לא סורק, מפרש בגמרא משום דכל סורק להשאיר נימים מדולדלים מכבד." Up till now it was quoting the Tosfot. Now the explanation. משמע, דסורק גם כן לאו פסיק רישא הוא, ואם כן, אפילו לא מתכוון להשאיר נימים אסור. תלמודי רבי שמעון דפסיק רישא אסור, אלא לאו הווי פסיק רישא, ואפילו הכי אסור דמכוון הוא להשאיר נימים. Says the Keren Ora, if we read the Tosfot carefully, we have to notice that the Tosfot thinks that when I comb my hair, it is not certain that I will be taking out pieces of my hair or any hairs out. It's not psik reisha. Why? Because if it was psik reisha, says the Keren Ora, I would not be needing any kavana to be oser according to the Shita of Rabbi Shimon. Why is that? Because it's true that Rabbi Shimon says davar shelo mitkaven mutar. If I'm doing one thing and there's a result that doesn't happen always, it's okay. But Rabbi Shimon agrees that if I'm doing one thing and always the result will be another result, which is asur, then even though I'm not mitkaven, it is still asur. The explanation of it in the Gemara is by a very interesting and a bit revolting picture of somebody who's cutting the head of a rooster because he wants to play with the head, and whoops, the rooster is dead. Psik reisha, if you cut somebody's head, he's dead. So you can't say I didn't want to kill the rooster. Well, I will only be interested in your head. No, you take the head of a rooster, the rooster is dead. So that's why Rabbi Shimon agrees that in such a situation, it's still asur. So says the Keren Ora, listen closely to the Tosfot. The Tosfot obviously does not think that when you comb your hair, it is always certain that you'll be taking some of your hairs out. Because if it's always happening, psik reisha, constantly, then we would not be interested in your kavanot, and we would just say it's asur because Rabbi Shimon agrees with that. Continues the Keren Ora and says, ועל פי זה אינו מובן פירוש רש"י ז"ל בשבת תפנון, that we saw. וכתב בטעמה דלא סורק משום פסיק רישא, ואחר ממש מכן. ולא הבנתי, דאדרבה הגמרא משמע דאיסור משום כוונה הוא. Says the Keren Ora, now that we understood Tosfot, we see that Tosfot is really written in the sugya. So, if Tosfot is right, how come Rashi is saying psik reisha? If he says that, the sugya doesn't work. Why is the sugya talking about chavana? It's a kushiyah on Rashi and Rosh to explain our Gemara as if it's talking about something that will always happen. If you comb your hair, you will always take some hairs out. That cannot be because the sugya is talking about kavana. So how come they're saying this? That combing your hair is psik reisha of taking hairs out. So the Keren Ora finds this a kushiyah on Rashi, and he goes to length to try to explain and understand the Shita of Rashi. But before we continue, I'll just stop and mention that if we work with the Tosfot, according to the Tosfot, if I'm not interested in shedding my hair, I can comb my hair. because combing does not always result in taking out bits of my hair. And according to Rashi, combing is always asur because whenever I comb, it takes out hairs. So, as we said, one kushya on Rashi is how does he read the Gemara? Another kushya on Rashi is there a machloket here in reality? How come on the same reality of combing, Rashi says the hairs always fall out, and Tosfot says they don't. So let's look what Karen Ora explains in the Shita of Rashi. ויש לומר, דמפרש, הכי, וסורק מתכוון להשאיר נימים מדודלים, היינו להסיר ערבובי שיער זה מזה. ומפני זה, תקרא שהוא להשאיר שיער, אבל לא שיתכוון להסיר שיער. So the Karen Ora is doing something interesting here. He says it's true that the Gemara says lehashir נימים מדודלים, but the word lehashir doesn't mean to take out shedding hairs. No, it's not about shedding. It's about lehasir. It's sin that you have to change into samich. What's lehasir? To untangle. How does that help us? Karen Ora explains this, that Rashi thinks that sometimes people are not interested in taking out hairs, but they're interested in untangling knots. And what Rashi is saying is that if you're combing your hair because you have knots in your hair, don't be surprised that your hair will come out. That's psikresha if you're interested in combing. And if you're interested in combing your hair to take out knots, you can't come and tell me, oh, Yael, I'm so surprised. I was just trying to take out knots and, oh, lo and behold, hairs come up. According to Rashi, the explanation of the Karen Ora, you can say that you're not interested in shedding hairs if you're combing your hair if it's not full of knots. Because if you're combing straight hair, some people have very thin hair, and also with all the stuff that we have, creams and whatever. So that's okay, combing your hair if you're not opening knots. There's no problem with that. Why is there no problem? Because there's no psikresha and you're not interested in losing the little hair that you have on your head. But if you're combing your hair because it's full of knots, then that is asur. So this is a good explanation for Rashi, and it actually says that what is asur for a Nazir and on Shabbos to do is to comb hair which is very, very tight and full of knots. That's asur. But to comb straight or open hair or conditioned hair, that's okay. So the Karen Ora explained this, but he has one problem on his explanation. He said, this was a good explanation, but Rashi doesn't say lehasir, he says lehashir. So the word shedding really is there. So I made this trick and said, okay, it's not really shedding, it's about untangling, but that's not so easy with what's written in the Gemara and in Rashi. And therefore, the Karen Ora offers a different explanation of another Acharon here in Nazir, the Orach Mishor. And the Orach Mishor says the following, ואין באורח מישור שכתב לי דברי רש"י בשבת שכתב, סורק אסור משום פסיק רשע. אפילו אחי צריך למי מאחחת ומתכוון להשאיר נימים, ואם לאו אחיה בפסיק רשע דלא ניחא לידי מותר לדברי הארוכסה. Okay, this really calls for some knowledge in Masechet Shabbos. So in the machloket that we quoted about Rabbi Shimon and Chachamim, דבר שאינו מתכוון בפסיק רשע, one of the Rishonim, an important Rishon, the Aruch, says that it's true that Rabbi Shimon agrees that psik resha is asur, but only if you're interested in the result. If you don't want the result, it is mutar, according to Rabbi Shimon. If you don't want the rooster to die, even though it's dying, it's mutar to Rabbi Shimon. Well, maybe the rooster is a different story, but at least here, with the hairs, if you don't want to lose any hairs, according to Rabbi Shimon, even if it always happens, it will be mutar, because the Aruch said that for Rabbi Shimon to be osir, it's not enough for it to be psik resha, it has to be psik resha then nichale. So this is also an interesting explanation that Rashi agrees with the Aruch, and that's why Rashi says it is not enough to say that something is psik resha, you also have to say that you're interested in it. The Karen Ora does not like this explanation, and he gives a very interesting explanation why he doesn't like this. He says, no, says Karen Ora, the chidush of the Aruch, that only psik resha, the nichale, is asur, that is only in Hilchos Shabbos. Why? Because in Hilchos Shabbos, we have the isur of melechet machshevet. So if I'm interested in something, then it's asur. If I don't want it to happen, I cannot be osir it because of Menachet Machshevet. This is not Menachet Machshevet. But that is only in the case of Shabbos, not in the case of Nazir. In Nazir, you don't have this special idea of Menachet Machshevet. The result is what is the problem, and we're in the Sugya in Nazir. So why, if we're dealing with Nazir, we're interested in Kavanah? The Kavanah should not make a difference if it's Tikreisha, even according to Rabbi Shimon. So let's sum up what we saw. We saw two different explanations in the Keren Orah to understand Rashi. Both of them are interesting. Both of them have nafkaminot, but both of them did not really settle the Keren Orah himself. So the first one said that what is asur according to Rashi is untangling your hair. If your hair is full of tangles, you cannot comb it. Why? Because even though you're only interested in untangling your hair, there is always going to be a result of taking some hairs out. What is the nafkamina? If somebody does not have tangled hair, if their hair is very thin or very straight or very conditioned, that's fine. They can still comb their hair according to this. And on the other hand, if somebody has tangled hair, you cannot say, oh, I'm not interested in taking my hairs out. I don't want to lose my hair. I just want to untangle my hair. That's irrelevant, because if your hair is tangled, it is always going to shed some hairs on the way. So that's the two nafkaminot of the first explanation. And the problem with this is that it doesn't really sound right with the Gemara and Rashi, because the Gemara and Rashi said Mishir and not Mesir. And according to the Orach Mishor, only if you're interested in shedding your hair, that's a problem. But if you're not interested, it's mutar, according to Rabbi Shimon. The problem with this is it works in Ilchot Shabbos, but it doesn't work in Ilchot Nazir. So I want to sum up what we saw. What is asur in Nazir and what is asur in Shabbos? According to Tosfot, only if you're interested in shedding hairs, that's asur. If you're not interested, it's mutar. According to Rashi, he says, no, it's psikresha. What does Rashi mean? So we saw a few explanations that all of them don't result in saying that any combing is asur. All the explanations said that if you're doing something that will for 100% cause you to lose your hair, for example, having tangled hair, that is what is asur. But if your hair is not tangled, it is mutar to comb it on Shabbos. So that's what we saw today, and I'm mentioning again a very important thing. We are not learning halacha here. We're learning Gemara B'iyun. We did B'iyun in Tosfot and Rashi, and we saw that actually there could be that some hair combing will be mutar on Shabbos and also mutar for a Nazir. So I hope you enjoyed our Gefet today. We looked at two dapim. The Mishnah was broken in two, and we saw a lot, I think, interesting things. And B'ezrat Hashem, I hope to meet you again after Purim and learn some more Nazir with you. So B'ezrat Hashem, may all of Am Yisrael have Purim Sameach, and may we have Nafochu, and all of our sadness will be turned into joy. B'ezrat Hashem. Take care.